Hello and welcome to Tonight at 8 from the RSGB. Operating portable provides a welcome outdoors pursuit for many amateurs, especially during these social distancing COVID times. Summits on the Air, or SOTA, is an awards scheme which is designed to encourage and reward such activity, especially working from the many peaks of this country and around the world. Our presenter tonight is James Stevens, M0JCQ, and he's been an active portable operator for some time, finding it the perfect way to combine amateur radio with adventure. So we really look forward to hearing all about his travels and contacts tonight. Welcome to James.
Thank you very much for the introduction, David, and welcome to all the people tuning in tonight and watching this. Thanks for joining us. So, as David said, my name's James M0JCQ, and I've been involved in SOTA for about the last 5 years, almost 6 actually. I think my first activation was back in 2014, shortly after getting licensed. And yeah, I'm going to take you through kind of some of the adventures that I have had with SOTA so far, and yeah, hopefully kind of whet your appetite and get you out on the hilltops.
Well, we look forward to that, James. And before we see your presentation, just a reminder that if you're watching this on Monday, the 7th of September, then this is live and you can ask questions and add comments at any time on either BATC or YouTube during the presentation or straight afterwards. Please include your first name and call sign if you have one. Also, please note that if you can make this video fill your screen on most devices, usually by double clicking on the picture or clicking on the full screen button. But now it's time for the presentation, so over to you, James.
Thank you, David. So, as I was saying, welcome to my presentation on portable adventures with summits on the air, also known as SOTA. So, what is SOTA? A lot of you have probably heard about it. You've probably heard it on the air, or you've read about it here, there, and everywhere. Well, the official kind of definition is Summits on the Air is an awards scheme that encourages portable operation in mountainous areas. So that sounds pretty serious. But summits are graded in using a point system. So you have 1-point summits, which can be very minor hills, right up to fully blown mountains, which can be 10 points or so. So they're all kind of graded. So there's kind of something in it for everyone. I think that's the point I'm going to try and make during this presentation is you don't have to be especially fit or a mountain climber to actually go out and activate these hilltops and mountains. You can kind of choose your own level and engage in it at where you're at, essentially, and just get out into the great outdoors and enjoy some fresh air and some radio at the same time. So there's some key terms in SOTA that you will hear the term activator banded around. We're also known as mountain goats. So we're the people that go out to these SOTA summits. We put them on the air, we activate them, we set up all the radio equipment. We do a lot of the kind of hard work in that kind of arrangement. And then conversely, you have the much more comfortable option, which is chasers. And they're affectionately known as shack sloths. So they essentially sit in the shack and they chase people like me that go out to these hilltops and mountains to activate them. So, you know, the activator is essentially the rare DX that the chaser back at home is trying to contact. And as I've said already, you have summits that range from hills to mountains, and they're using a graded point system, essentially 1 through to 10 points. 10 is the maximum. So if for whatever reason the pool was listed as a valid SOTA association tomorrow, Mount Everest would only ever be 10 points. It would never become more. And it's all in relation to the other mountains in that country as well. So, you know, a 10-point summit here in England, in G, is typically a lot smaller than a lot of other countries. Say Germany, for example, a German 10-pointer would be a lot higher. So there's quite a lot of pictures throughout this presentation, and most of them are various adventures around the world and within the UK as well. So on the right-hand side here, you can see me halfway up Snowdon a couple of years ago. Snowdon's obviously the highest mountain in Wales, and it's 1,085 meters above sea level, and it's a 10-point summit. And in that picture, it's kind of remarkable because I've been up there several times, and I think that's the only photo I have where you could see a view. every other time when I've been on the summit itself, it's all covered in cloud, so you can never see a view. So it's quite a rare picture, that. So we'll go on to the next slide. So what have I really been doing with portable activity? It's not just been SOTA. I've been doing portable activity for quite some time, whether it's contesting or just sitting on a hilltop that's not even SOTA and playing with some radio. In terms of SOTA specifically, I've currently activated 235 SOTA summits. This is the last check that I did. It may have increased slightly somewhat since, but yeah, 235 SOTA activations. I've activated 141 unique SOTA summits, so that's like where I haven't returned to the same summit. I think I've logged just over 8,000 QSOs while portable. I've operated using about 10 different prefixes across 3 different continents. And I've pretty much used every band except for the microwave spectrum. So I've kind of used top band right through to 70 cents. And yeah, I don't think there's a band that I've particularly not worked there except 30 meters. That's the only one I can really think of off the top of my head. I'm not quite a mountain goat. So, well, what is a mountain goat? And I kind of referred to them as being known as the activators earlier, but a mountain goat is also someone that's achieved 1,000 points in the activators category. So it means they've earned 1,000 points as an activator. That's quite a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of dedication as well. So I'm getting there, not quite a mountain goat yet. I'm at 950 points. So I've got another 50 to go. So I may hit that this year, or if not this year, it'll probably be next year. I think COVID is somewhat delayed that mountain goat achievement. But when you get to that point, you get a nice trophy, and yeah, it's the sense of achieving something, sense of accomplishment. So the picture you can see here on the right on the slide deck is me and some work colleagues actually on the highest mountain in the northeast of the United States, Mount Washington, which is 1,970 meters. It's a 10-point summit. It took us, I think it was about 3 hours each way to walk up and back down. So quite a long distance walk, carried all the HF equipment and then activated it at the top. And we were there with work, and we just kind of went a few days earlier at the weekend, and we thought, you know what, let's actually try and get up this mountain top before the boring work stuff happens. So we walk all the way up for like 3 hours. We get to the top, and it was not quite how we imagined it. So when we got there, we realized there was actually a mountain road that led all the way up to the summit. So we could have essentially driven up to the SOTA summit, and there was a nice visitor center, and you could buy hot dogs and you could buy beer. It was totally not what we had imagined when we'd set off in the morning to climb this mountain. The point I'm making here is that there's a lot of summits in SOTA that are actually almost drive-on summits that you don't need to spend a whole expedition getting up to the top of. You could just drive to the top. We'll go into some of the rules around that later, but this is one of those. So, you know, if you live near Mount Washington, you could drive to the top and then you could activate it and you could get your 10 points. So you don't always have to walk a long distance. So what makes a SOTA summit? There's quite a lot of rules around this. I'm just going to cover the very basic thing that kind of governs it. Essentially, what we're looking for in a hilltop or a mountain is that it has about 150 meters prominence compared to the surrounding land. And that surrounding land also includes other hilltops. That's why quite often you'll have several hills together, and only one of those will be a SOTA summit because it has the 150 meter prominence over the surrounding land. So that's essentially what governs it. That's why we don't have too many within England. And I say that there is actually quite a few, but they're kind of in specific areas. So in G, we currently have 175 SOTA summits. I don't have many near me at all, actually. My local summit is Wendover Woods. That's about 20 minutes up the road. It's a 1-point SOTA summit. I can get that 1 point once a year because you can't keep going back to the same summit and then getting the points for activating each time you go. You can only claim those points once a year. So, and then after that, I think my next SOTA summit is Walbury Hill, and that's about an hour and a half on a good day to drive to. And then beyond that, it's kind of Wales or the south of England, basically. So, but in total, there's 175 in some pretty key places as well. So if you live near the Lake District or in the Southern Pennines, Northern Pennines, there's quite a lot of SOTA summits there. In Wales, there's about 158, quite a lot in the south of Wales, so the Brecon Beacons, quite a lot in the north as well, in Snowdonia. If you're a Scottish activator, you're spoilt for choice. There's 1,218 SOTA summits in total. So there's quite a lot of choice there. Some of those are pretty gnarly summits. They're going to be pretty hard to get to. They're going to be out of the way, and the conditions are going to be pretty fierce compared to what we generally experience in England, at least. And Northern Ireland also has 65 SOTA summits in total. So SOTA is very much worldwide now. It started within the UK. It's now gone worldwide, and we have 178 active SOTA associations. And these cover everything from England, G, kind of where it started, right through to ZL9, the sub-Antarctic territories. You can go to these most far-flung places now and activate a SOTA summit there. I think Bouvet Island even has a SOTA summit or two. But good luck getting there. So in total, there's over 100,000 SOTA summits in the world now. So there's a lot of SOTA summits. There's a lot to do as an activator. But on the right-hand side here, you can see a picture of me. This was taken a couple of years ago, and I was on top of Scafell Pike, the highest peak in England, which is just shy of 1,000 meters above sea level. It's a 10-pointer. And as you can see, I'm just using really simple equipment, which we'll go into in a bit more depth later. But it's just 2 meter FM handheld and a vertical dipole. That's all I was using. And it's because of the location and the takeoff you have from such a position, it's just a guaranteed pile up from there. You're going to work a lot of stations from a place like that. So what is a valid SOTA activation? There's a few kind of rules around it. So the access to the final summit must not be by motorized vehicles. So you essentially cannot drive right to the top of the summit and then operate from your car. You can't do that. You can drive to the summit, you can park in the summit car park if there is one, and then you can walk outside of your car, maybe 100, 150 meters away, and then set up your station. That's valid. But if you operate from the car, then that's not going to be valid for SOTA. So you can't stay in your nice warm car, as appealing as that might be sometimes. Additionally, it has to be done using a portable power supply. Typically, that's battery. Could also be solar. Outside of the UK, I think that's more popular, but in the UK, not so much. Could even use wind power as well. It doesn't really matter as long as it's a portable power supply. It's not mains electric, and it's not the power supply from your car or vehicle. You have to make a minimum of 4 contacts to get the activator points in SOTA. So if you make 3, it's classed as a valid activation, but you don't get the actual activator points. So you need to make those minimum of 4. Quite often you might end up on 3, and then that 4th one will be the hardest one to get. So you might get the first 3 in like a couple of minutes, and then the last one might take a bit of time. Essentially, you could use any mode. It's really up to you. The only thing you can't use is terrestrial repeaters. So you could just use regular simplex SSB, HF, VHF, microwaves, doesn't matter. You can use LEO satellites, you can use the high Earth orbit satellites, that's fine, just not terrestrial repeaters. That's the only mode that you can't use. You can use data modes, you can use CW, doesn't matter. There's no power limit on SOTA either. So it's essentially down to your licensing conditions, and also you've got to think about your power source. It's going to be quite hard to lug up a generator to a SOTA summit and run it off of a battery for any amount of time. So typically SOTA activators use QRP power. And on the right-hand side here, you can see me on, where was this? This was the north of Spain, the SOTA summit of Kazanfo. Quite high one, 1,642 meters above sea level. 8 points. And this SOTA summit had never been activated before. So I was the first person to kind of go up it and put it on the air. And I actually checked the other day that it's still not been activated by anyone else. So before me and my wife went up it, we were planning a longer walk, an all-day walk that was kind of passing by it, at least the base of it. And then according to maps and internet resources, we kind of researched it, looked at the topography of the mountain, and worked out any potential routes up according to the coal lines, the contour lines on the map. Because there was no marked footpath or anything like that up the summit. It was just basically a mountain top that you had to get to the top of somehow. And here I was activating it using a Yaesu 817, 2.5 watts, I think, at the time. And, I made contacts all around Europe and stateside as well. So that was quite a big achievement. I think that's one of the few that I've kind of activated for the first time. All of the summits in the UK pretty much been activated at least 10 times now, if not, I think somewhere in the thousands of activations. So yeah, it's quite hard to get anything rare like that within the UK. So that's what a valid SOTA activation is. So why should you try SOTA? There's a few compelling reasons, at least I think, I'll let you be the judge. But number one, there's really low noise levels. So if you're used to operating from the shack at home in a residential area, you might be used to a lot of kind of electrical interference, VDSL interference, all sorts of electric smog that's rising your noise floor up, making it hard to hear other stations. You really don't have that on most SOTA summits. Most SOTA summits, even on HF, I'll maybe have S1, S2 of noise possibly, short of there being any kind of QRN caused by storms in the area. So you have that real low noise floor. So you can hear a lot more than you would hear at home. So you can work really low DX. Number two, you have a really great takeoff. So obviously this applies more to VHF and UHF. You're typically on a high point. There's not much around you to attenuate and absorb the signal. And you could see the horizon. But I think it also kind of comes into play on HF as well. Your takeoff to the horizon, to the ionosphere is unobstructed. There's nothing in the way typically. So you're afforded that really good takeoff. Number three, antenna experimentation. Some SOTA summits have a lot of space on top. Some, like my local Wendover Woods SOTA summit, it's a big grassy field essentially up on a hilltop, and I've got loads of space. I could put any type of antenna up that I want to. If I want to try a top band dipole, I could certainly put that up. So it gives you a lot of options there, and also the option to do kind of side-by-side comparisons. So during an activation, I could have two antennas set up on the same band, and I could switch between them. I could kind of do what's known in other trades as A/B testing, and I could try one antenna with an activator and try the other and see what the signal report difference is. So it allows quite a lot of scope for antenna experimentation there. Number four, QRP is a lot easier from SOTA summits. And there's several reasons for this. One, you've got that great takeoff that I've referenced already. But additionally, you've also become the DX as the activator. So you're essentially on the receiving end of that kind of, the DX chasers. And everyone wants to work you. So everyone's got extra ear, they can really hear everything you're saying because they're listening very closely. Whereas, with random contacts that you have, maybe shack to shack, people might not have quite the same level of patience because, well, you're not that special, are you? But on a SOTA summit, you are, and there's a lot of people around the world that will want to work you. So QRP becomes a lot easier. And also, you're typically using resonant antennas. So to go to a SOTA summit and use a compromised antenna is not ideal, basically. If you can, you would use a resonant antenna, making the very most of the power you have available to you. Number five, it's really great at exercise. So, if you're going to walk up a hill and back down and it takes all day, you're really going to know about that. It's a lot of good fresh air. It's a great workout. You've got to carry all your equipment. So you're carrying your radio, your battery source, your food, your water, everything you need is on your back essentially. So it's really good exercise, gets you out into the great outdoors and you get a lot of fresh air. And that's really good for me because I typically work in office environments, or now at the moment, due to COVID, I'm working at home. So it gets me moving, gets me kind of interacting with nature again. But that's what I really like it for. It also offers me that sense of adventure, which can be kind of hard to get with amateur radio sometimes when you're in a nice warm shack. Short of going on a really exotic expedition, at least it's hard to get that sense of adventure, and you certainly get that with SOTA. It takes you to some really wild places, and quite often you have wild conditions that match the wild place itself. So you have to deal with the elements, you have to deal with really strong winds, the rain, the heat occasionally if you're lucky, typically driving cold and rain. So yeah, adds that element of adventure. Not so much danger, but adventure certainly. In some sense, up to some SOTA summits can be quite tricky. You know, you have to scramble, you have to climb up rocks, and you do have to be a little bit careful. Number 7, it's quite a good advert for the hobby, I think. It really gets people to engage in amateur radio because, you know, you're in a place typically where there's other people, at least hikers, maybe dog walkers, maybe other random people that are flying kites or whatever, depending on the summit you're on, and they're gonna naturally have some questions about what on earth you're doing there. So you can kind of engage passers-by, and you can talk to them about the hobby and introduce it. And some might look at you like crazy, which we are a little bit, but also some might be interested. They might actually take it to the next step and then get licensed. You never know. So it's about planting those kind of seeds of ideas in people's heads about, oh, there is this hobby called amateur radio. Oh yeah, I saw that guy up on that mountaintop doing it. That looked kind of cool. I wouldn't mind trying that one day. So that's another good reason to give it a go. Number 8, there's quite a lot of awards associated with it, especially with SOTA. There's a whole bunch of different awards and certificates and trophies you can get, and it also extends to other schemes as well. There's kind of complementary schemes like the Works Britain Trig Point Award, for example. That kind of fits really hand in hand with SOTA because a lot of SOTA summits will have trig points as well. And there's other kind of schemes that run in parallel to SOTA as well. There's like HEMA, which is humps excluding Marilyn's. We don't need to go into the definition of that. Essentially what it is any mountaintop that isn't really a SOTA summit. So there's loads of those as well. Some of them are really serious mountains, like Scarfell is next to Scarfell Pike, and it's a serious mountain in its own right, but it's not a SOTA summit because of its proximity to Scarfell Pike. But Scarfell is valid for the HEMA scheme, so you can operate for HEMA from there. And there's also Wainwrights on the air as well. If you're in the Lake District, you can go to, I can't even remember how many Wainwright summits there are now, but there's hundreds of them in the Lake District, and activate every single one of them. There's been a few people that have done that as well. I think a big one for me is also the challenge aspect as well. It's all well and good operating from home and getting your equipment set up, but to operate outdoors and portable against the elements and carrying everything you have on your back can be a bit of a technical challenge. There's a lot of scope for stuff to go wrong there. And I certainly know of current SOTA activators who have kind of done everything else in the hobby, or at least they felt like they'd done everything else in the hobby and they needed a new challenge, and then got into SOTA, and it really kind of reinvigorated them to kind of continue that because it offered a brand new set of challenges. You know, what happens when your cable breaks on a summit? You don't have access to a soldering iron typically. You don't have a spare lying around. You have to try and make do. You have to try and fix it with a penknife, or, you know, make do and mend essentially. So there's a challenge aspect to it too. And finally, it's a really good opportunity to fine-tune your operating skills, because you're going to be dealing with pile-up situations where lots of people are calling you all at once. You need to kind of run the pile-up down in an orderly fashion and make sure everyone gets a chance to work you, essentially. So it's really good for fine-tuning those operator skills. So that was the top 10 reasons to try SOTA. You'll probably find your own if you give it a go, and there's probably some of you on here who are experienced activators and have your other reasons as well, but those are the top 10 for me. On the right-hand side of this slide deck, you'll see Corndon Hill, SOTA Summit in mid-Wales, just over the Welsh-England border. Not too high, 513 meters above sea level, but this photo was taken about 7 a.m. A couple of years ago in February. And I think overnight we'd had like a light dusting of snow, and you could see the right-hand side of the trig point has just been blasted with snow overnight. Sun's just coming up. And I think this comes back to that sense of adventure. There's no way I'd be on a snow-covered SOTA summit at 7 a.m. in the wintertime if it wasn't for SOTA. You know, you'd have to come up with a very compelling reason for me to be there. But SOTA took me to such a place, and it was absolutely beautiful. And that was just one of 5 SOTA summits that me and Michael G0POT activated that very day. So in terms of some kind of other places it's taken me to, and these are all quite different actually. So starting from the very top left hand, you've got the SOTA summit of Pen y Ghent, which is in the Northern Pennines. It's 694 meters above sea level, 4 points, quite a shapely summit. It looks beautiful, especially from that kind of vantage point. So that was a really good one for 2 meters FM, but it's kind of typical of the UK countryside. You know, that's what we kind of expect to see of a SOTA summit in England, if you're lucky. And then if we go further over to the right-hand side, we see where I was the night before the picture of Pen y Ghent was sent. So this was me cooking up a curry and an arm bread on the side of Vernside in the Northern Pennines. And I was doing a spot of wild camping, basically the day before a whole bunch of activations. I was just maybe 10, 20 meters beneath the actual summit itself, camped out and cooking a nice curry after a work trip that I'd had in the north of England. So there's no chance I would have been there otherwise if it wasn't for SOTA. And then going down to the bottom left-hand side, we've got the SOTA summit of Sonalo. This is on the island of Lanzarote in the Canary Islands, and it's notable for a few reasons, in fact. The first one being that it's essentially on top of a volcano. So this is a collapsed caldera, I think, a corona volcano top. So you can't see the full circle you'd expect. A bit of it's collapsed, but this is the remaining bit. And it took me about an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to this from the nearest road. And it was across very sharp lava rocks, essentially. You could cut your hand essentially on it quite easily. I had to wear gloves to get over the lava field. It took me a long time to get there, really hard work, really hard terrain. But I only earned 1 point from it. And the point I'm trying to make here is that the amount of points you earn aren't always directly proportionate to the amount of the effort you've put into actually getting there in the first place. This one was a lot of effort, but I only got 1 point from it. Whereas other 10-point SOTA summits, as I said earlier, you could drive onto the top of, so it would be very easy in comparison, but you get 10 points for it. Sometimes it could be a little bit unfair like that, but it's just an interesting observation. As you can see in that picture, I was using a vertical antenna for HF, and yeah, it's a multi-band as well, typically because there wasn't a lot of space to put up anything bigger than that. You've got a ledge both sides. You've just got this little bit of kind of volcano top to operate from. Then going over to the right-hand side, that's a SOTA summit called Wildcat Mountain, which doesn't sound like it's in the UK, and it's very much not. It's in the state of New Hampshire in the north of America, 1,348 meters above sea level. Funny story about this one is I tried to activate it. I took all the equipment I needed, but couldn't make any contacts. So I walked all the way up, tried to operate for an hour, couldn't make any contacts whatsoever, and then had to walk all the way down. Didn't get anything for that. That was a wasted trip other than a beautiful kind of vista to look out from and a lot of good exercise getting up and down. The reason being, I'm quite reliant on spotting myself, so SOTA chasers know where to find me. And for this location, it's quite different in America. Like, you can go to some places that are so wild that there's no mobile phone reception. There's not even basic text messages, let alone mobile internet. So I had no phone reception. I couldn't get a spot out. No one knew where to find me. So I just called and called, and I didn't get anyone that would just heard me and gave me a shout. So that was a bit of a waste, a bit of a shame. But you win some, you lose some, and I've lost some. I've also won some, but it's just the luck of the draw sometimes. So in terms of SOTA equipment, for HF, typically using an Elecraft KX3. I also have an 817 that I use, and a lot of you probably have at the shack as well. I'll use something like a lithium polymer battery. I don't really use slab batteries, and certainly not car batteries. They're just too heavy, really, whereas a lithium polymer battery will be nice and light. It maintains a steady voltage before it finally discharges completely. And a 4,200 milliamp hour one will keep me going for like about 4 hours under a typical kind of pile-up condition using the Elecraft KX3. So it's more than enough for what I need. In addition, in terms of antennas, I'll typically use a linked dipole held up with a fishing pole support in the center. I may also use a vertical antenna, which you could see on that bottom picture there, which is taken in Mallorca on the SOTA summit of Massanella. Just a short kind of adjustable vertical antenna. I'll also take something to log on. Doesn't really matter. I typically use a phone or a tablet, but you can use paper as well. It doesn't really matter. Just something to jot down the contacts you've made. Additionally, I'll take a compass, a map, and a GPS unit. So I never go with just a GPS unit. I think that's quite an important point to make. You know, electrical devices can fail, they can run out of battery, anything can happen. And if that happens when you're lost on a mountaintop and the mist is rolling in and it's getting dark, that suddenly becomes a bit of a problem. So you want to make sure you have backups, essentially. So I always have a paper map with me, as well as the GPS unit, which I primarily use. And optionally, I'll take a flask of tea as well. It could be quite cold on SOTA, so it's nice to have a flask of tea. Looking at the pictures on the top right hand side, you've got essentially what you're looking at there is my bag that I've taken to this summit. This is one of my first activations, actually. It's Serra de Foia in the Algarve in Portugal, and I had all of my equipment in that little bag, essentially. All of my HF equipment, the antenna, the radio, the power, everything I needed was in that little bag. So try and keep it light if you're going to go activating. Don't take too much, and try and cut down on the amount of equipment you take. And the bottom right-hand side, you can see the Elecraft KX3, and it's operating on top band. And I did a top band activation on Penavan last year, which was a lot of fun at dusk. It's good to kind of get on some of the unusual bands, at least for SOTA. Top band's not commonly used because it requires a massive dipole or a massive compromise antenna. So there's quite a lot of use of VHF for SOTA. It's not just HF. So 2 meters FM is really popular. It's got a lot of advantages too. So 2 meters FM means you could just take a handheld to a SOTA summit. It's really lightweight equipment. You could just take a small vertical dipole or even the rubber duck antenna you have on the handheld, and it weighs nothing. So you could walk all day with that. And you also have an unbeatable takeoff for VHF from most SOTA summits. You can see on the picture directly below the text. This is on Araran in, apologies for the pronunciation, by the way, but on the summit of Araran in Snowdonia. And you've got a lovely takeoff from there, really good for VHF. You don't need more than a handheld in a vertical dipole. You'd probably be fine on just a rubber duck antenna, to be fair. The other extent of that is, and I wouldn't recommend the other photo, on the right-hand side, you see a 5-element 6-meter Yagi at dusk. I set this up for a contest. I wouldn't typically use something like this. I don't think I'll do something like that again. It's not a well-frequented hilltop, so not many people go there, but it obviously stands out a bit and might diminish the view somewhat for other people, although it was fantastic for 6 meters in that contest with that takeoff, as you can imagine. So what do I use in terms of VHF SOTA equipment? Well, I typically use a handheld. So I've got two here. I've got my trusty Yaesu FT270. This is quite a heavyweight 2 meter only handheld. And I use this because it's waterproof. I can chuck it in a puddle, it'll be fine, it'll carry on. I can throw it against the ground. It can roll off a mountaintop. It'll be fine. It'll survive. It's hard as nails, has really good dedicated 2-meter filtering inside it as well, which is important when you're operating from SOTA summits within the vicinity of commercial masts. So you might be near a paging mast, and you're going to get a lot of kind of adjacent interference there. And like if you're using something like a Baofeng or something with less good filtering, it's going to overload the handheld, and you're not really going to be able to kind of hear anyone calling you. Also, you could use other slightly smaller handhelds. I've just got this one. It's the Yaesu FT4X, I think it's called. It's a lot smaller compared to the other one, so it's a kind of nice weight saving. Not too sure how good it is really with dealing with kind of summits that have high levels of RF around them and kind of keeping that interference out. You could use your trusty 817 as well. That'll do you proud on the whole VHF spectrum and into UHF as well. It'll give you 6 meters, 2 meters, 70 SEMS as well. So you've got options as well as your HF. In terms of antenna, mostly using a vertical dipole. You can see it in the right-hand picture there. That was my wife, Christina. Recently got licensed just a couple of weeks ago as M0JCQ. She was making her first ever contact using the vertical dipole and a handheld, and that was taken in the Brecon Beacons on a SOTA summit called Van Brichynog. I'm still not too sure how to pronounce it. I've been up it 3 or 4 times now, and I still don't know how to pronounce it. Apologies to any Welsh viewers there. But a vertical dipole will do everything you need it to do. It's resonant. It just works, and it'll work a lot better than a rubber duck antenna. And it's really lightweight, quick to set up. You're good to go. I might occasionally use a Moxon as well, and I have Moxons for 6 meters, 4 meters, and 2 meters. They give me a bit more directional gain, which might help if I'm on a SOTA summit that's a kind of a longer distance away from any kind of centres of population or towns or cities where there's likely to be ham activity as well. So essentially, lightest kit you could take onto a SOTA summit is a 2-meter FM handheld. And you can see on the picture directly below, I've just taken a handheld up there with the rubber duck antenna. This is on a summit called the Red Screes in the Lake District. And I think from up there, I managed a number of contacts on the handheld, over onto the Isle of Man, over into GI, GW. So you're working quite a few other DXCCs as well. And it just kind of proves the great takeoff you have from such a SOTA summit.
James, I don't want to interrupt your flow there, but I will just come back on one thing that Simon Fairburn has sent us. He's told us how to pronounce that, and it's brick egg nog. That's what he's put there. So
brick egg nog. Okay, I like that. Yeah,
maybe you'll remember that. Okay.
Yeah, that'll be useful. I've actually been corrected a number of times by Welsh chasers when I've been on the summit, and I always butcher them. I try my best, but some of them are quite difficult.
Oh, that may help you remember.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. I have embedded a video here. You'll see there's a YouTube link to my YouTube channel, and I put quite a lot of stuff around SOTA up on YouTube. You can watch a 2-meter FM pile-up from Red Screes, and you can see the kind of pile-up action you might get on VHF, which might actually surprise you if you're not used to operating from a SOTA summit or you don't have a serious VHF contest setup. There's a lot of activity you can hear, even on 2 meters FM simplex. There's loads going on, but typically we can't hear it when we're in our shacks because we're down in the valley or whatever. But up on a SOTA summit, you hear everything across a much larger radius or distance. So SOTA is really good for QRP, which is great because I love QRP. So it's really typical and common that SOTA activators use QRP because powering QRP radios is just so much more practical than powering fully blown 100-watt transceivers, let alone linear amplifiers. So you could just use a small battery of a QRP radio. You know, it could weigh almost nothing, the battery in itself. Also, it's great for QRP because you're the DX, and I mentioned this earlier. Everyone's trying to chase you. Everyone's trying to contact you. You're the rare one suddenly. So everyone's making that extra effort to get through to you. You have that unobstructed takeoff that I've also covered. And typically most of my activations are using like between 2.5 watts, maybe up to about 10 watts. I don't really use much more than that typically. I occasionally use 50 watts on an 857 or something similar, but very rarely. And I've actually done a few experiments with QRPP, SSB, kind of experiments in various SOTA summits. And I did a few when I was in the Canary Islands a couple of years ago. And I managed 100 milliwatts back from Echo Alpha 8 to England, 100 milliwatts SSB. And I think that was 10 meters when the sunspot conditions were somewhat better than they are now. Also managed 400 milliwatts back to the United States from Echo Alpha 8 as well. So you don't need a lot of power when you're on these SOTA summits. Low power will do. Again, if you go to my YouTube channel, and there's a link in the slide deck, you can watch some of those kind of QRPP experiments as I was doing them with various chasers. Sometimes you might have to use QRP from a SOTA summit. So you see in the top right there, there's a picture of the SOTA summit, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation as well. Apologies for any Spanish viewers, but I think it's like Roque de los Machacas or Macacas, Rock of the Children, I think it translates as. And it's a really high one, 2,421 meters. It's 10 points. It's the highest on the island of La Palma in the Canary Islands, and it's got a space observatory on top of it. And so there's a lot of really sensitive equipment there. So they've got some really strict flux density limits in terms of the power you can put out to not interfere with these really sensitive telescopes, satellites, etc., etc. And of course, you really don't want to be interfering with that. It's the largest observatory in the Northern Hemisphere, I believe. So you really don't want to interfere with any scientists doing, proper work. But I did the calculations, and I worked out the very maximum I could use from that SOTA summit was 2.6 watts without potentially kind of exceeding these flux density limits. And so I operated from 1 watt SSB there, and I made a number of contacts around, I think it was just around Europe. I don't think I managed stateside, but I managed around Europe on 1 watt SSB. So a little bit of power can go a long, long way. Something slightly different to that is if you look at the picture below, this isn't taken from a SOTA summit, but it's taken from a hilltop while I was at Portable with a friend, Phil M0NVS. And we were in a 2-meter contest, the backpackers contest. There was one on yesterday, which some of you may have taken part in. So 2 meters, and we were using 3 watts at the time. And we worked into Oscar November and Papa Alpha from kind of this Oxfordshire hilltop. So that was fantastic. So, from a good enough location, a little bit of power can go a really long way. It's really quite powerful. So a few more pictures just to whet your appetite, really. Starting from the top left-hand side, you've got the summit of Decides, which is on the island of La Palma in the Canary Islands again. You can see we're at such an altitude here, we're actually above the clouds. That's what I found out. If you go to some of these kind of European summits or summits elsewhere in the world that are really high up, above the kind of heights we typically get in the UK, you get above that cloud, and then you get nice sunshine. So that's quite pleasant. Even if it's cloudy and horrible below, you get above that and you get nice sunshine. Hard to achieve in the UK, though. Typically, you just walk into the cloud and then you sit there for the entire time. On the right-hand side, this was the island of Lanzarote, again in the Canaries, a SOTA summit called Corona. And nothing really related to coronavirus, but it was a old extinct volcano, essentially, another one. I'm just perched on the edge again, and this isn't really worth many points. It's 2 pointers, but it was hard to get to again. It was up the side of a volcano, but I had fantastic DX from up there. I just worked stateside station after stateside station. It was just relentless for like an hour. It's just fantastic takeoff. Maybe something to do with that kind of sea path you could see in the distance there. You can see the sea takeoff there. So that probably helped. Then coming back kind of domestically, if you go to the bottom left-hand side, you've got sunset on the SOTA summit of Skiddaw, which some of you may have been up, which is in the Lake District. That was a really fun activation. Went up there for sunset purely because we'd been doing a massive walk beforehand, and we just kind of we fitted Skidor in at the end. Essentially, it was a nice add-on at the end of the day. So we went up there for sunset. I activated on 2 meters FM. Then we descended back into darkness. You want to make sure you know what you're doing if you're going to do that. Don't just wander up there with a paper map and no head torch and just hope for the best. That's probably not going to end well. But we kind of knew the ascent route. We'd done it a number of times before, so we were feeling quite confident that we could successfully navigate our way back down in the dark. Bit of a weird one on the right-hand side. This is where I was on the SOTA summit of Wahara on the island of Tenerife. This is a really high SOTA summit in its own right. It's 2,717 meters, sorry. 10-pointer, big in its own right, but it looks directly at El Teide, which is the highest mountain in all of Spain. And that goes up another kilometer. So despite being at that kind of height, my activation was kind of blocked to the north of Europe because of El Teide blocking that takeoff to the north. So it somewhat attenuated the signals, I think, at least. So yeah, just kind of interesting. That kind of proves the exception to what I was mentioning earlier of having a really great takeoff from most SOTA summits. You can still get some obstructions in your path. But, you know, it's the highest mountain in all of Spain, so we could probably let it off for that. So you may never have done SOTA before. And if you were thinking about giving it a go, I would probably give you these top tips for a new starter. So number one, I'd think about safety first. You want to make sure you've got warm clothes, you've got extra layers to put on when you get to the SOTA summit, because initially you walk up, you'll be really hot, but then you'll be sat down on the SOTA summit, the wind will start and your body temperature will just drop. So you need to have lots of layers with you, lots of warm clothing. You're also going to need ways of navigating. So that has to be a compass and a map. And then optionally, I'd also add on a GPS unit as well. But I wouldn't just take a GPS unit alone. As I mentioned earlier, you want to have a backup there in case the batteries fail, which they do, always at the worst time, always as the mist is rolling in. Then you need to revert to that kind of map backup and know how to use that map as well. Don't just carry it for a laugh. Know how to read it. So be safe. That kind of comes into the next top tip, which is just to practice on a small and easy SOTA summit near your house. So don't go to some adventurous 10-point SOTA summit and just hope for the best. Just practice on a one-pointer nearby your home. It might be a 5-minute walk from your car. You can take equipment there easily. You can find out what works for you and work out how to set everything up, because when you go to these more adventurous SOTA summits, you want to know how to set up your equipment in the most timely fashion, in the most effective way possible. And you need to be able to do it when there's a howling wind, maybe lashing down rain, and just generally harsh conditions. So practice on a nice, grassy, sunny SOTA summit that's near your home first. This makes life a lot easier later on. Secondly, double check all your equipment before you leave your house. I think every SOTA activator has forgotten some vital part of equipment. I certainly have on a few, 1 or 2 activations. The Old Man of Store on the Isle of Skye was a prime example just a couple of years ago. Got all the way up there to the top with my wife, where we walked maybe 2 hours to the top. Got there, had everything I needed except I think it was a BNC to SMA adapter. That was the only thing I was missing. And I didn't have a penknife to cut the coax and try and jam that in directly into the handheld, which would have made a kind of botched job. But yeah, just that one adapter, I didn't have it. And I just really kicked myself that I hadn't double checked all the equipment that I needed. So make sure you do that before you leave the shack. I found it to be quite good to kind of visualize your setup before you leave. So like in your head, just go through setting up the station. And as you go through each bit of equipment, make sure you have that in your bag. Next top tip would be to travel light. Take the minimum equipment you can, because if you start lugging up a car battery and a heavy base station rig, you're really going to regret that. It's going to diminish the fun somewhat, especially if you have to walk a long distance. So travel as light as you can. Think about the equipment you take and the weight that it's taking up. So good SOTA bounds to start with. You'll find a lot of activity on 40 meters, a lot on 20 meters, and a lot on 2 meters FM specifically. Not so much on 2 meters SSB outside of contests, but FM sure. There's lots of SOTA activity there, lots of chasers, lots of fellow activators as well. So they're three really good bands. If I was to say, just use these three, that would be my selection there. You could, of course, use any band you want, and you work other chasers, but there's loads of activity across those. And last tip would be to spot yourself. Make sure people know where to find you. You can send your spot so the chasers know which hilltop you're on or mountainside. They know the SOTA reference. They know the frequency to try and tune in and listen carefully for your QRP signal. So use that where you have mobile phone reception. And if you don't, you can send a kind of an alert prior to your activation to let people know you're going to be on a certain hilltop around a certain time on a vague frequency. And then people will generally find you anyway, and then they can spot you regardless. Spot yourself, and then you'll have a pile up. So the picture below this is a panorama over Snowdonia from the SOTA summit of Agarn, which is obviously in Snowdonia. And you can see it's got a lovely vista, nice sunny conditions. And you can see that dodgy 2-meter vertical dipole is just kind of resting up against a summit cairn there. And just work loads and loads of stations from up there. Lovely activation. And with that, we'll go to questions. And thanks for watching.
Sure, James. Well, you'll be pleased to know we've got quite a few comments and suggestions for you. I'll let you take a quick drink or something, I think a little break after that mammoth session. Firstly, just to let you know, we've got people watching from all over the place. We've got Dean KC9REN watching from the USA.
Fantastic.
We've got John G7RWF watching from Colchester. Alan
Nice.
G0SMD from Starbridge, and what else did I see down here? I can't see where it was now. There was another interesting place. Oh, from Germany, I think we had a contact here.
Yeah, fantastic.
From DE2TRF. So you've got quite a few people watching you anyway. So some of those questions for you. Lawrence says, having watched an intrepid group lug a generator and dish up SOTA for a microwave activation, it does get done. He says, what's the most exciting SOTA to SOTA QSO you've ever had, and what's the most QSOs you've ever done on a single summit, and which summit?
Ooh, good questions. Most exciting summit to summit. I don't think there's a most exciting one that I could put off the top of my head. I think they're all exciting because it's a fellow activator that's gone to the trouble of being on a hilltop, set up their equipment, and you're making direct contact with each other. And quite often you'll find the chasers cannot hear one of the two SOTA stations because of their noise floor, whereas we can hear everything. So I can work quite far across the world, and I have worked other SOTA activators in the US. Work stateside on QRP to QRP power. So any summit to summit kind of contacts is just fantastic. Most amount of QSOs ever made, probably in the region of about 150. There were a few in the kind of Canary Islands that were like that. You just couldn't stop. Every time you wanted to finish, there was just another pile up of stations wanting to call you because conditions were so good and everyone wanted to work you. So yeah, you could work over 100 quite easily, typically, depending how long you want to spend on that summit.
And Lawrence does actually also ask, by the way, what's the heaviest load you've taken to a summit?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. Ridiculous loads. Primarily, if I've been doing wild camping on the summit as well, I've been taking my tent, my sleeping bag, my cooking equipment, my food, my water, plus my HF equipment. So just last year, I wild camped on top of Pen y Fan, which is the highest summit in the Brecon Beacons in the actually south of Britain, I think, in fact. And I carried up all my camping equipment and my HF radio equipment up there. That was probably nearing 35 kilos, I think, in total. It was ridiculous. I wouldn't recommend that.
All right. By the way, if you're watching this now or you came to us halfway through and you'd like to ask a question, this would be a good time to do it to James. Either you can ask it on BATC or on YouTube. You're live at the moment. We've got G4KVT asking, that's Jason. Thanks for the excellent talk.
Jason.
You probably know him. Where will you be operating
Yep.
for on the upcoming annual EU SOTA Day on Saturday, 19th of September 2020?
That is a very good question. I think it occurs just before I get up to the Lake District. So unfortunately, I won't be in the Lake District for it. So I'll probably be on my nearby SOTA summit of Wendover Woods. A relatively unexciting one-pointer, but yeah, I'm going to go to the Lake District, I think, just after that. So sadly, I miss it.
All right. On BATC now, Jeff ON8NT asks, how difficult is it to travel with a battery in your luggage on planes, for example?
Good question. Very good question. So it typically gets through in my hand luggage with no issues. This is the lithium polymer battery, essentially a battery used for like model aeroplanes. Not too big, doesn't look particularly scary. A slab battery looks a bit more intimidating. It's a random black box, not great. So with my lithium polymer battery, it typically gets through okay. I will just leave it in my hand luggage and it will just go through the X-ray machine. And it's only ever been picked up once, and that was at Heathrow. And then the guy kind of asked me, hey, is this your luggage? Is this your battery? Or actually, more to the point, what is this thing that we can see on the picture? He looked a little bit unsettled. So I just, put his mind at ease and said, it's a battery. I'm an amateur radio enthusiast. Just explained it to him what it was. And then he looked at it and was like, okay, fine, yeah. But it was just on the X-ray machine. It looks somewhat suspect. It's a battery and it's got wires coming out of it. So I can understand why they might pick it up. But that's the only time. It's the only happened once in the UK. Every other time it's gotten through transatlantic flights, absolutely fine. So I always make sure I have my amateur license certificate with me, basically. So I've got a print out of my license. I can show that to officials. Just puts everyone's minds at ease that I'm more legit.
That is very good advice, and I'll share with you something else that I was given. I used to carry quite a lot of equipment to my work, particularly to the States. And some of it did look rather, odd because it was a black box with a red and green button. It was actually a data logger. And someone gave me some really good advice, and that is to take some brochures with you of the equipment that you're taking. Because that way, if it does look like something that you've made, maybe like the KX3, which you can make as a kit after all, if you've got a brochure to substantiate and prove what it does, it just might help. So I hope that might help some people as well.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. I've not thought of that. Yeah.
We've got a Phil M0KPH has said, hello James, the Spanish SOTA was higher than Skyfall Pike, but was only worth 8 points compared to 10 points for Skyfall Pike. Why is this, and how does the point system work?
Yeah, it's a good question, Phil. So the point system is all in relation to the association that summit is in. So essentially the country it's within. So within England, we only really have SOTA summits just underneath 1,000 meters. There's nothing bigger than that. So it's all in relation to the highest in the area, basically, as I understand it. So in Spain, they have much higher mountains than the one you saw that I think was 8 points or 6 points or whatever. So it's just in comparison to the other summits in that country or association.
Okay. Paul Graham says, didn't you do Wainwright's before you got Mountain Goat? I think he might have been talking actually to David Stansfield now I look at it.
Okay. Could be, yeah.
And Graham G8NWC says, choice of software for logging, any preference, and does the temperature affect the battery performance at all?
Brilliant question, Graham. So, yes. And I've had problems. So what I would recommend, it depends on the device you're using, but if I'm using an Apple tablet, which I have used quite a lot in the past, I use some logging software called Rumlog, MG, Rumlog as in the spirit that you drink. And that's really good, runs really, really well on Apple devices, iPhone, Apple tablets, etc., etc. There's a few various loggers on Android as well. I don't really have one that I've really settled on just yet, but I have had problems with heat, especially when you're operating from hot summits, especially when you're not protecting the tablet or the phone from direct sunlight. The devices can overheat, and this actually happened mid-pile-up on the Canary Islands. So I think I'd worked like 50 stations and people were just calling, and suddenly my tablet overheated and it went into kind of a shutdown mode to kind of protect the internal circuitry and let itself cool down. So essentially I lost my logging device, and I still had a live pile up that was going. So thankfully I had a backup paper and pen, and I just went to paper logging. And I think I probably logged down another 40 contacts before my tablet then recovered and would boot back up. Then I kept it in the shade and it was okay.
And what about the battery performance, the lithium battery that you suggested people take? Is that susceptible to variations in temperature as well, given performance?
I haven't had problems with that, actually. I have heard other people having problems with lithium polymer batteries, especially in kind of extreme heats. It's probably good to keep it inside your bag out of direct sunlight to avoid typical problem you'll have is that the batteries will swell up due to heat, and then they're unusable after that. But I personally haven't had issues, and I've been using my lithium polymer battery for over 5 years now, a really long time. It's been pretty abused on SOTA summits. In terms of duration that it will power a radio, depends how much power you're putting out, depends on the radio, etc., etc. But using an Ellicraft KX3, pretty efficient radio, QRP power of maybe 10 watts SSB. I've had pile-ups continuing for like 4 hours, and the battery hasn't fully drained. But the one word of advice I would say there is get a voltage monitor on your battery, so you can monitor when the voltage is starting to drop on the lithium polymer batteries, because that means it's basically about to reach its full discharge point. And you really don't want that with lithium polymer batteries. You want to make sure they're not going beneath a certain voltage level, just to protect the overall battery and stop it from not taking a charge afterwards.
Yeah, and also probably protect your radios as well for not brown out and stop working or being unreliable. We've got Ed D5LP watching us on BATC.
Hey,
he says, another tip for newcomers, use the equipment you have, don't buy new gear to start with, and go with an experienced SOTA activator the first couple of times if you can. Learn from others, he says. Yeah,
it's great advice from Ed, and I know Ed, he's a very experienced SOTA activator and loads of experience. And yeah, I would totally echo his statements there. Definitely, just use the equipment you have, even if it is a Baofeng handheld. Just go up and give it a go. You might experience a whole bunch of interference, but you might not equally as well. You don't have to generally buy special equipment for SOTA. You can generally cobble together something you already have, whether it's an 817 handheld or some other HF radio.
Yeah, with a link to what you were saying about logging and the way your tablet gave up and you went back to pen and paper, Lawrence McKellife, I think he's pronounced, do you ever just do an audio recording and then do your log later in the warm and dry off the SOTA?
Yeah, I can see the temptation there. I've never done that. No, I know the satellite guys do that for satellite passes and what have you, but I don't really want to listen to like over an hour of audio after I've got back from my activation. I like to do my activation, then just upload the log as soon as I get back home. I don't want to have to do all the admin around that. If you've got more time than I do, then feel free to do that and kind of type it all up manually later. But I like to just log it on the summit, on a tablet or a phone, and then just upload it after I get home. I don't want to have to rekey it or enter it in manually and make mistakes. Just spend a lot of time doing that.
Lawrence and also Chris M0RSF and me indeed congratulate your wife Christina on her new course, an M7CID, I believe
fantastic.
It was. And I've got a little supplementary question for that. This then sounds like the sort of way of maybe bringing the rest of your family into the hobby, because amateur radio can be a very insular thing when you're sitting in the shack with your headphones on. But this seems to me that it's an aspect of the hobby where you can help and involve the rest of the family.
Absolutely, yeah, and I have actually involved friends as well, and I know Michael and Rebecca are watching as well, and they recently got licensed. They're friends of mine. They've joined me on a few SOTA activations, and they kind of got interested in amateur radio during the kind of period of lockdown. They recently came into the hobby. They just passed their foundations on Friday, so I'll be taking them up to a SOTA summit sooner rather than later, I suspect.
Oh, so, congratulations to them as well. Alex Hill has a question. How do you explain what you're doing when you meet other hikers? I normally get asked in G and LD for every activation and probably don't do a great job, he says.
Right. So did he mean like other hikers that are asking what you're doing
I
with
guess
the
so.
equipment?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's a common question, especially when you put up like a support for an HF dipole. You know, it's 10 meters up in the air. It's quite obvious to see something's going on. It doesn't look that standard on top of the hilltop. Uh, so I actually let people try and guess. So I actually turned the question back on them to start with. I say, well, what do you think I'm doing? Because it's quite entertaining to hear the answers. You know, I've had everything from, oh, you're speaking to aliens to you're a spy or whatever. You know, it's always quite comical. But then you can go on to kind of gently introduce the amateur radio hobby and explain that you're trying to make contact with other stations around the world, and that you're in a special kind of niche of the hobby called Summits on the Air. That's why you're on the hilltop. And generally, there's follow-on questions that come from that, because they're like, oh, wow, they're looking at the equipment. Then they're like, well, you could speak to the rest of the world on this equipment. So it kind of raises follow-up questions and a bit of interest that way.
Mm. In fact, Dave M0TAZ says, I found people get quite excited when they realise you're activating with another amateur, as they can get twice the SOTA points for working both of you.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not, actually. I don't know if a chaser can get double points from the same summit in the same day. I don't actually know if that's true or not. So maybe it is, but I don't know. If it is, then fantastic, because I'll typically be up on a SOTA summit with my wife, who is now licensed. Maybe Michael and Rebecca will join me as well, and then we've got 4 activators and 4 times the points. So yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it?
That sounds a good reason to do it. David Holman has said, have you tried HEMA humps, excluding Marilyn's award hills, and Wainwright's on the air? These are the other 2 hill-topping awards in the UK and as good as SOTA. Oh no. Okay, I think we've got a slight problem with the link to James at the moment. I didn't expect that. James, are you there?
I think you're back. You cut out there.
Oh, did we? Okay. I think we were still on the air. But anyway, I'll repeat that question. Did you hear it? It was from David Holman. It said, have you tried HEMA, HEMA humps, excluding Marilyn's award hills, and Wainwright's on the air? These are the other 2 hill-topping awards. You can't hear me? Oh, dear. Okay. Can you hear me now?
No, you're cutting out.
Okay. That's strange. Okay. Well, I hope we're going to get you back, because it's nearly the end of the programme. Tammy, my wife, is just sitting off camera here, and she's just busy trying to get something. I think we just lost this meeting. Look, Tammy here. So I don't know if you can quickly get it back. We're going to try and get it back. We don't know why. We think we're still on the air, so we think our internet connections are right. But this is one of the things about being live. But I'll tell you what we'll do while we're waiting to see if we can get James back. Just to tell you about James's website. This is his website. It's www.hamblog.co.uk. Can you hear us now, James? No. I can see him, actually, which you can't see at home at the moment, but he's virtually a still frame. Anyway, that was James's website. So it's www.hamblog.co.uk. We're desperately trying to get James back. As I said, I think we're still on the air ourselves. But I think we may have to quit the call, Tammy. But there we are. Sorry if we didn't quite get to your question, but I think we got through most of them. And just one thanks to James. We're just going to go back one more time to see if we can get you. James, can you hear me? James. Okay, well, that's the first time this has happened on Tonight at 8, but never mind, there we are. We're living in strange times and we do rely on the internet, so one of us has lost the connection, and I'm sorry for that, but at least we saw all of James's presentation. And of course, that ends tonight's Tonight at 8, and on your behalf, I'd like to thank our guest James Stevens, M0JCQ, for sharing his SOTA adventures and answering all those questions. We hope you've enjoyed this Tonight at 8, and if you'd like to see details of future webinars or send any comments or feedback, please visit www.rsgb.org/webinars. It's on the bottom of your screen there. But until next time, this is David G7URP signing off and clear. Bye-bye.